I was both excited and a bit nervous about the 5-year high school reunion. Riverside wasn't a big town, but it had its charm, and I was curious to see how everyone had changed since graduation. However, there was one worry I couldn't shake: Brad. Our relationship in high school had ended on a bitter note. He was charismatic, but beneath that charm was an obsessive and aggressive behavior that made me cut all ties with him. I had no idea how he would react to seeing me again. The reunion started off lively. It was great to see old friends, share laughs, and reminisce about the past. The music, the lights, everything felt familiar, almost nostalgic. I was beginning to relax and enjoy the evening. That's when I saw him. Brad was standing near the entrance, his eyes locked on me. I tried to ignore him, focusing on the conversations around me, but it didn't take long for him to approach. "Alex," he said with a smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Long time, huh?" I forced a smile, trying to be polite but keeping my distance. "Yeah, it's been a while," I replied, not wanting to prolong the conversation. Brad, however, didn't seem to pick up on the cue. He started talking about the past, bringing up moments from our relationship that I'd rather forget. The way he spoke, as if nothing had changed, deeply unsettled me. "Look, Brad," I interrupted, trying to sound firm. "It's nice seeing you, but I need to catch up with some other friends. See you around?" "Oh." I turned away before he could respond, quickly putting some distance between us. I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and intense, as I walked away. That brief encounter was enough to reignite the discomfort and unease I had always felt in his presence. After the reunion, I tried to forget about the encounter with Brad. I convinced myself I was overreacting, that he wouldn't do anything. But that peace of mind quickly disappeared when I started noticing strange things happening. The first time, it was subtle. I was leaving for work in the morning and saw Brad standing across the street, leaning against a car as if waiting for someone. Our eyes met, but he didn't make any move. He just stood there, watching. I pretended not to see him and went on with my day, but the discomfort lingered. Things had got worse in the nights that followed. One night, I was at home watching TV when the doorbell rang. I went to the door but didn't see anyone through the peephole. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. I thought it was just some kid playing a prank, but when I looked down, I saw a handwritten note. "We need to talk, Alex." There was no signature, but I knew exactly who had left it. Fear began creeping into my daily life. Brad wasn't just trying to reconnect. He was stalking me. Days later, I started noticing his presence at places I regularly visited. He was at the coffee shop I stopped by every morning, at the grocery store, even at the park where I jogged at night. He never approached, but I always knew he was there, watching from a distance. The breaking point came on a rainy night. I was at home, trying to relax, when I heard a knock on the door. It wasn't the doorbell this time. These were loud, insistent knocks, like someone was trying to break the door down. My heart raced. I knew it was Brad. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do, until he started calling my name, his voice muffled but clearly angry. I tried to stay calm, but panic took over. I didn't respond, didn't move. I just waited, hoping he would leave. The knocking continued for what felt like an eternity, until it finally stopped. I waited a few more minutes before approaching the door and peeking through the peephole. He was gone. The fear I felt hearing Brad knocking on my door was more intense than anything I had ever experienced. The morning after that horrible night, I called Chris, my best friend. He knew everything that had happened between Brad and me, and I needed someone I could trust. When I told him about the stalking and what had happened the night before, he was silent for a moment before saying, "Alex, my dad can help you." Chris's dad, Mark, was a private investigator. I knew he had experience with situations like this, but I never imagined I'd need his help. Chris made the introduction, and that afternoon, Mark called me in to talk. I explained everything: the unexpected encounters with Brad, the notes, the stalking, and that last night when he banged on my door. Mark listened seriously, taking notes as I spoke. When I finished, he looked at me and said, "This can't go on. He's crossing a dangerous line." He assured me he would do everything he could to stop Brad and keep me safe. A few days later, Mark confronted Brad. He didn't give me many details about the encounter, but he made it clear that he used all his influence and professionalism to put an end to it. Brad was warned. Any future contact or stalking would have serious legal consequences. Mark was direct. and from what he told me, Brad was scared enough to understand that it was over. The relief I felt was immediate. From that day on, Brad vanished. No sign of him across the street, no appearances at places I frequented, and most importantly, no more knocking at my door. For the first time in weeks, I was able to sleep peacefully. But the impact Brad had on me remained. Even though he was out of the picture, the fear that he might come back haunted me. Slowly, I began to reclaim my life and my sense of security, surrounded by the support of Chris and his family. The experience made me more cautious, more vigilant, but it also showed me that even in situations of vulnerability, there are people willing to protect us. I didn't want to go to the 10-year high school reunion. Brookfield had never been a place I missed, and the idea of seeing people I barely remembered wasn't exactly appealing. But my friends insisted, saying it would be fun, a chance to relive old times. We arrived at the banquet hall, and I was immediately surrounded by familiar faces. Some people looked exactly the same, while others were nearly unrecognizable. Conversations were filled with "remember when?" stories, but I felt like something was missing, a real connection with these people. Later in the night, as I was getting a drink at the bar, a man approached me. He looked to be in his 30s, just like the rest of us, but his face wasn't familiar. "Michael, right?" he said with a smile. "Yeah," I replied, trying to be polite. "Sorry, but I don't remember you." "Ethan," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I don't think we had many classes together, but I remember seeing you around the halls." There was something off about Ethan. The way he talked, how he tried to make me remember him, it all felt forced. But he seemed to know things about the school, details only someone who was really there would know. This left me feeling confused, but I kept the conversation going, thinking he might have just slipped under my radar back then. As we talked, Ethan started asking questions about my life now, where I lived, what I did for work. At first, it seemed like small talk, but soon I noticed he was being unusually persistent. Despite my growing discomfort, I ended up giving him my phone number when he asked, not thinking much of the consequences at the time. The night continued, and Ethan blended into the crowd. I returned to chatting with my friends, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling he'd left behind. But something about the way he approached me, like we were old friends, stuck with me and made me uneasy. After a few hours at the reunion, I decided it was time to head out. Most people had left, and I was starting to feel the weight of the night. As I was getting ready to leave, I bumped into Ethan again. He was leaning against the wall as if waiting for something, or someone. "Hey, Michael, leaving already?" he asked, smiling like we were old friends. "Yeah, it's getting late," I replied, trying to stay polite, though the strange feeling in my gut persisted. "I can give you a ride if you want. I'm heading the same way," he offered casually. I hesitated for a moment, but after hours of conversation and socializing, it felt rude to decline. Besides, I was still trying to figure out if he really had gone to my school or if I'd just forgotten someone. "Sure, why not?" I answered, trying to sound relaxed. We got into Ethan's car and started driving. At first, the conversation was easy, filled with casual talk about the past, but something still felt off. Halfway through the ride, my phone buzzed with a text from a friend who'd been at the reunion. "Michael, be careful with this guy named Ethan. He's been talking to several women, claiming he went to school with them, but no one knows who he is. He's been using different names." My blood ran cold. I glanced at Ethan out of the corner of my eye, trying not to show the panic rising inside me. He looked calm, driving as if nothing was wrong. But now, every word he spoke felt like a hidden threat. As the car approached a red light, the reality of the situation hit me hard. I needed to get out, fast. The tension in the air was thick, and with every passing second, I felt more and more vulnerable. Ethan, if that was even his real name, kept driving with the same calm expression, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. When the light turned red, I acted on instinct. Without thinking twice, I threw the car door open and bolted out, ignoring Ethan's shocked shouts. The cold night air hit me, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could, sprinting across the street and ducking into a nearby alley without looking back. My heart pounded as I ran, desperately searching for a safe place. After turning a few corners, I spotted a parked taxi and jumped inside, rattling off my address to the driver, begging him to drive away as fast as he could. The driver, sensing my panic, didn't ask questions, and sped off. As the taxi pulled away, I glanced back and saw Ethan's car still idling at the intersection, but he wasn't following. Relief washed over me, but the adrenaline still surged through my body. I had no idea if he'd give up that easily. When I finally arrived home, my phone was buzzing with messages from friends, all asking if I was okay and if I'd left the party safely. I quickly told them what had happened, relieved that I'd escaped. One friend mentioned seeing Ethan's car circling the neighborhood after I'd left, which only deepened my fear. I locked every door and window, still shaken. I tried looking up Ethan's number online, but found nothing useful. It was like he didn't exist. The only thing I knew for sure was that I had given my phone number to a complete stranger who clearly had something sinister in mind. That night, I blocked his number and stayed on high alert, knowing I had narrowly escaped what could have been a dangerous situation. The experience left me rattled, and I realized that no matter how familiar a situation seems, we can never let our guard down. I was a little nervous about my 4-year high school reunion. I'm living in a big town, but it had its charm, and I was curious to see how everyone had changed since graduation. However, there was one specific worry I couldn't shake from my mind. Brad. Our relationship in high school had ended bitterly. He was charismatic, but behind that charm was an obsessive and aggressive behavior that made me cut all ties with him. I wasn't sure how he would react to seeing me again. The reunion started off lively. It was great to catch up with old friends, share laughs, and reminisce about the past. The music, the lights, everything felt familiar, almost nostalgic. I was beginning to relax, enjoying the night. When I saw him, Brad was standing near the entrance, his eyes fixed on me. I tried to ignore him, focusing on the conversations around me, but it didn't take long for him to approach. "Alex," he said with a smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Long time, huh?" I forced a smile, trying to be polite while keeping my distance. "Yeah, it's been a while," I replied, not wanting to prolong the conversation. But Brad didn't seem to pick up on the hint. He started talking about the past, recalling moments from our relationship that I'd rather forget. The way he spoke, as if nothing had changed, deeply unsettled me. "Look, Brad," I interrupted, trying to sound firm. "It was nice seeing you, but I need to catch up with other friends. I'll see you around." "No, I turned my back before he could respond, walking away quickly. I could feel his eyes on me, heavy and intense, as I distanced myself. That brief encounter was enough to reignite the discomfort and unease I always felt in his presence. I spent the rest of the night trying to avoid him, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave me. The reunion, which I had expected to be a fun and nostalgic experience, had turned into a tense, anxiety-filled evening. I knew Brad hadn't changed, and the fear that he might try to reconnect in a more aggressive way began to consume me. As the night went on, my discomfort only grew. Every conversation, every forced laugh, felt like I was sinking deeper into something I shouldn't be part of. The behavior of the guests, the way they avoided specific questions and seemed to watch everything around them, made me uneasy. The old-fashioned music and outdated decor added to the strange, unsettling atmosphere of the house. While Emily was busy chatting with a group of people, I decided to step away for a moment to clear my head. That's when a man I hadn't seen before approached me. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a serious face and a worried expression. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, glancing around as if afraid someone might hear him. His words took me by surprise, and a chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, trying to stay calm, though panic was rising inside me. "Listen, I don't have much time," he whispered, leaning closer. "The woman you came with, she's not who she says she is. You need to get out before it's too late." The fear I'd been feeling intensified. "Who are you? And why are you telling me this?" He hesitated, looking over his shoulder before answering. "My name's Greg. I ended up here by accident, just like you. But I couldn't leave. Now I'm trying to help you avoid the same mistake." He stepped back, his eyes filled with desperation. "Trust me. Leave while you still can." Before I could respond, Greg quickly disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there, trying to process what he had just said. Panic surged through me as the truth began to unfold. Claire Foster. The name echoed in my mind, making every fiber of my being scream to leave that place. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but I knew I needed to get out of that house. Emily, or Claire, whatever your name is, I have to go, I said, trying to stay calm but already taking a few steps backward. Her smile vanished, replaced by a coldness in her eyes. Daniel, there's no need to act like this. Everything's fine. Don't you want to stay a little longer? She took a step towards me, but there was something menacing in her tone that made me even more afraid. No, I really need to leave, I replied firmly. Without waiting for an answer, I turned and quickly walked toward the door. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the eyes of the other guests on my back. It was as if the entire house was watching, waiting for something. When I finally reached the door, I yanked it open and stepped outside. The cold night air was a welcome shock, but I didn't stop. I kept walking to my car, glancing back only once, just enough to see Claire standing in the doorway, watching me with that same empty, almost predatory gaze. I drove out of Greenwood as fast as I could, the darkness of the road only adding to the urgency and fear I felt. Once I got home, I immediately went to my computer and started researching Claire Foster. What I found was enough to make my blood run cold. Reports of involvement in mysterious events, disappearances, and connections to suspicious circles. She seemed to change identities frequently, always embedding herself in new social circles before disappearing without a trace. With adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I blocked every possible way she could contact me. Social media, phone, everything. The thought that I had almost fallen into a trap, into something far more dangerous than I'd imagined, was terrifying. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I needed to cut off any ties with her for my own safety. The tension didn't fade in the days that followed. I avoided going out at night, always on high alert for any suspicious movements around me. I still couldn't fully grasp what had happened that night, but I knew I had narrowly escaped something sinister. What was supposed to be a simple social gathering turned out to be a trap filled with lies and dangers I could barely comprehend. Claire, or Emily, or whatever her real name was, vanished from my life as quickly as she had appeared.